I'm with Mike Watsa, and I'm with Alliance for Community Media, and I'm here to ask Mike why he came and what are the highlights of the points of the talks that you've been giving. I know you've talked several meetings, and I've attended one of them, but there's so many points being made. Is there any way possible to summarize in a 5-minute, why you're here and what are some crucial issues that you see facing public access?
Yeah, well, first of all, I am a 30-year litigator, regulatory public policy attorney based in Detroit, Michigan, and I've become sort of one of the primary, if not the cable attorney for the folks from the Alliance and from Michigan JUDY2 and so on. And that's why I'm here, I think, because they'd like to hear what's going on in the cable law and cable policy. Big issues in cable today. You're right, it's hard to pick which ones to jump on. We talked earlier that Comcast, of course, is attempting to purchase Time Warner, and in doing so, they entered into an agreement with the Department of Justice in Washington to divest themselves of a certain number of subscribers in the millions so that they would come under the prohibition.
30%.
Right, roughly 30%. And so what they've decided to do is they're spinning off the Midwest, which includes your state, Indiana, our state here in Michigan, Illinois, parts of Illinois, Ohio, Wisconsin, and Minnesota, the Midwest, basically, off to an entity that will eventually be called Greatland. And Greatland will be a new cable company in the Midwest, and that will allow Comcast to then acquire Time Warner, and that will give them the big markets on the East and West Coast. They're also keeping Chicago. And so we will all have Greatland. And what is interesting about that is that Comcast shareholders will retain, I think, a majority interest in Greatland, but Charter Communications will actually be the managing entity for Greatland. And so in many respects, here in Michigan and Indiana and so on, we'll be dealing with Charter. And then there's a provision in the agreements for Charter to acquire Greatland at some point down the road, and even Comcast to acquire it back if things work out as whoever wants it to work out. So that's a big deal. We've been going through a lot of transfer approval processes here in Michigan and Minnesota and other places in the Midwest. So that's been very active. There's some concern about whether that deal is going to go forward or not, or should not. What else? The FCC internet order of 2 weeks ago, that order just came out today. I haven't read it, but I was a little bit concerned about hearing about something or other in footnote 1285, which makes me think, oh boy, it's going to be a long weekend. I'm trying to read through that. We just walked out of a presentation by one of my clients who built the first Michigan gigabit broadband community. And that means that they have decided in Sebowing, Michigan, that they weren't happy with the internet service being provided by, in that case, Comcast and I think AT&T. And so they built their own fiber-based network and are now providing internet to their members.
Was that Dan Gilbert? No.
No, that's another one. We can talk about that, though, because right on the heels of the ribbon cutting for Sebowing, which did it themselves as a local city, village actually, Dan Gilbert announced in Detroit, where he has, I think somebody told me, 75 buildings now, and my office is one of his buildings.
My nephew worked for him.
Sure.
From Notre Dame. He graduated in
sure.
Quicken Loan.
Oh, yeah.
And he just got out, and we were all happy.
He, Gilbert has brought so much good stuff, including a lot of young people, to downtown Detroit. I've been down there 30 years, and we've not seen this level of vitality ever. Maybe when I was a little kid.
But I went down there to have lunch with him a couple times. Yeah. Right, so I saw that.
Oh, it's impressive. Well, so anyway, the word is Gilbert was unhappy with the state of his internet costs and connectivity and bandwidth, which of course we suffer through. So we're a big firm downtown Detroit, and we have the same issues. And so he has decided he's going to build a fiber system, probably in some concert with the city, for the downtown business, which is fabulous. And the point of all this is that the speeds, the bandwidth, so how fast and how much you can push through the pipe, and then the cost is so radically different here in the U.S. From other places around the world. For instance, in South Korea, in 2015, this year, those children living in South Korea gave up their textbooks. They don't use paper books. They use notebooks and similar devices because they have fiber connections, high speed, gigabit, 1,000 times faster than what you could reasonably buy here, in every home. Every place has it. We are many years from ever getting that here. And so some communities, about 100 across the country, now one in Michigan, Seaboing, and maybe downtown Detroit with Dan Gilbert's help, will have our own fiber system and jump light years ahead of all of the surrounding communities that don't. And what that does is it links you to the information superhighway that all of our competitor nations are on. And, seconds count. I know in my business, getting this morning, the FCC released the internet order. There was a huge clamor among the communications lawyers across the country. And of course, I was speaking at the time, so I couldn't even be in the foray. But there was this huge battle to be the first one to put the internet order out to their clients, right? And there was such a clamor for it, and the pipe is so constricted because of the old 100-year copper system that AT&T is still trying to use for internet in addition to phone and so on, that people literally could not download the order. It was that tight, yeah. So that's a big topic. We've got to improve that situation.
What is the reason why we're so far behind? Is it just our infrastructure got clogged with the big boys?
Well, the big boys own it. AT&T, Comcast, Verizon are the principal owners of the pipe that connects all of us across the country.
So it's like the railroad barons. I mean, you can't...
I liken it to the electric industry 100 years ago. So 100 years ago, electricity became prevalent in some places where the industry that was developing built it. In other places, for instance, Marquette, Michigan, up in the Upper Peninsula, has a big university there. It's a large population, and to hear them tell it, they said, "Well, where's our electricity?" And the industry said, "Well, we'll get to you when we can." And meanwhile, your kids can just keep reading by candlelight. And Marquette and other communities, about 30 across the state, said, "No, we're not going to wait." And they built their own. So they are now faced with the exact same issue, where the industry is saying, "No, we haven't built it in your community yet. We're going to. We can't tell you when. And no, we don't want you to build it either." So it's crazy, but that was the fight 100 years ago, and it's the same fight today. They have a copper system that's was providing phone for 100 years, and they are protecting it viciously because they're making scads of money off of it.
But they don't want to build a newer and better one?
They don't have to, because they can make all the money they need off of the copper at no further investment. And so instead of spending money on the fiber, what they're doing is they're spending their money on lobbyists to fight and hold off all of us from getting what our competitors across the oceans are all getting.
Well, how come Korea doesn't have this problem? How come Korea could just go ahead? Because they didn't have this kind of problem?
Well, politically, I have not studied what the politics were in South Korea. I'm sure there must have been some private interests that were offended, but I also believe that the government said, we have to do this. Not unlike our freeway system. We didn't wait around for General Motors to build the freeway system. We knew that we needed it, and we built it so that everyone could use it. And so why this has been allowed to be stymied, it has a lot to do with dollars and lobbyists, and I think voters are starting to become aware of it. I think that we saw with this internet order where the FCC was deluged with millions of comments from regular folks like you and I, who don't comment on FCC issues. But on the internet, they did. And it's because everybody feels the pain. It costs too much, it's too slow, and it's too narrow a pipe. And we all get it. We may not understand it from an engineering standpoint or a policy standpoint, but it's a big, big problem. And I was thrilled 2 weeks ago when the FCC said, we're going to regulate the Internet Title II. We're going to make the carriers do what they need to do here, and hopefully that will involve fiber. They also said in another order the same day that municipal broadband cannot be restricted by state law. They struck down 2 state laws that limited the amount of municipal networking that municipals could provide, and that is also a very, very cool thing to have happen.
That's good for the average person and average
It's
community.
great for the average person.
Their government.
Right. Provide some competition. And that should in turn spur the big owners of the system today to do what they need to do. If not a governmental pronouncement, you must do it, then the risk of competition from the local city or township or village doing it if they don't, that ought to spur them to do it. And that's fine, as long as somebody does it.
So there's the pressure. The pressure could be for people listening is that they could individually contact their representative.
Absolutely.
Or get your own local community, the municipality.
Right.
Right.
Because municipalities can, they have municipal tax-free bonds, and they can issue those bonds and fund a project like this. And like I said, there's about 100 of these projects around the country, and the people. One of the stories I tell about Lafayette, Louisiana, which was one of the first municipal broadband networks. Lafayette, Louisiana is in the middle of Louisiana. It's not New York City. And so they went ahead and they built one of these, and they got grief from the incumbent cable people and from AT&T and so on. But they went ahead and built it. And the next thing that happens within a couple of years is Disney comes to town and says, you're getting higher bandwidth here in Lafayette, Louisiana than we can get anywhere else in the country. And they built a Pixar studio. Now, I've seen it, I toured it, and so, as I was just saying in jest, you drive down the main road of Lafayette, Louisiana, and it's fairly rural, as you would imagine, right, in the backwater of Louisiana. And then as you turn this corner, here is this moon rover type high-tech building that's beautiful, but boy, does it stand out from the rest. And it's this state-of-the-art Pixar Disney studio, and it's there only because of the bandwidth that they could get. There were discussions here in Michigan, in Macomb County, about doing fiber a number of years ago, and I got called on it. It never ended up going anywhere because, frankly, the industry's really good at stamping out these kinds of ideas. But in league with that, there was discussion at that time we were doing the tax credits for studios. There was discussion with a major studio that was talking, if you build fiber and you get this high bandwidth in Macomb County, we'll build a studio there. Not unlike the Pixar studio.
So that's a big attraction.
Oh, it's
that's
big
a
money,
plus
it's big
for,
jobs.
like the Chamber of Commerce.
Yes.
That's a weapon in.
Well, you would think, but if you look, and you're from the Indianapolis.
So we're South Bend, Notre Dame.
Or South Bend.
Elkhart, RV.
So I get in trouble for this, but our state chamber, for instance, is you'd think that the chamber members, the businesses would say, well, we got to have this. Like Dan Gilbert, right? We got to have this. But then you start to dig and you find out who's really running the show at the chamber. And I'll give you one guess who one of the primary entities is.
AT&T?
And they do a really good job of covering all the bases, whether it's city council or the legislature or.
Well, they were the ones that
chamber.
funded, they spent millions in California on that new state law that eventually got us out, right? Aren't they the ones that funded all these?
22 states. They wanted their own access for their UVerse, and they ramrodded it through.
Through the state
The
legislators,
franchise laws that were done in 2006, 2007.
which shut South Bend down, shut all kinds of places.
Indiana was probably one of the worst laws. Michigan was a little better. Illinois was a little better than that. But that was an example of what a regulated industry does. They regulate and they deal with the regulators, and they're very good at it. And that was a real good example. I mean, they actually tried to do it in Congress, and they weren't successful back in the early 2000s. And then they decided, okay, we can't do Congress. We can't get this done at the FCC. We're going to go state by state, and they did. And if you're $1 trillion company, you get to do that kind of stuff, I guess.
But what suffers is a core principle of democracy, where truth and the people working truth have channels to get their message out.
Well, I mean, what you're all about as a PEG Center is local community programming, which is just communication at the basic community level. How much of that is there today? And how beneficial is that, and to whom? It's beneficial to us, right? Mm-hmm. So grandma can see grandson playing football on Friday night on the television.
Or the local churches can get their message out, or
Boy Scouts.
Right.
Right. But there's very little of that today. And why? Well, I mean, again, I get in trouble for this stuff, but the fact is there's no money to be made in that. And that's all the current owners of the pipe, that communication pipe, that's all they care about. They're for-profit entities. That's their job, is to maximize shareholder profit. I understand that completely. I represent for-profit entities. But when you put that kind of an entity in charge of all of our communication devices and that pipe that runs to all of us, you're asking for trouble, and that's what we've got.
Well, you got trouble. You have those two scriptures. I mean, they come to my mind. It says they teach things which they ought not to for filthy lucre's sake. So you can't really trust the mega corporations that are presenting the news, because money is a big motive. And the love of money is the root of.
Well, I mean, profit is fine. I have no issue with profit
within realms, but
you have to recognize, if you put those folks in charge of a monopoly, they're going to do what they're going to do, which is maximize profit, which is not a good thing for us. So that's the problem, and that's why we are in the pickle we're in here. So,
and that's why you're here to help network. People are here from all over the Midwest.
Yep, educate
and some
folks.
are from New Jersey. I mean, they come from Seattle, New Jersey.
Yep, educate folks on what the current state of the law is, what's coming down the pike, both statewide and federally, and try and help. One of the messages I'm providing in the couple presentations I've given today and tomorrow is that PEG centers and folks who are doing public access and education government have to start thinking very aggressively about how they're going to incorporate the internet into what they're doing today. Because historically, cable PEG has been based on the cable PEG model. That industry, that governmental provision of local community programming, has to start working very aggressively with the internet as these rules are all starting to change, and the conversion of technology. And it's very hard to figure out where cable is going versus internet. And that involves not only what you're doing in terms of programming, but where are your revenues coming? Is that going to continue? Are you going to continue to get cable and franchise and PEG fees from the local cable provider? Or are they going to provide all of their video programming over the internet? Which, if they do that, and the FCC allows it, which is a proceeding that's going on right now at the FCC, and we filed comments in those, potentially franchise and PEG fees go away, because it's all internet based, and as you know, you don't get franchise fees based on internet modem anymore. We haven't since Brand X, the Supreme Court case. So there's a lot going on, and it behooves everybody in the industry, like any industry, to keep current, be aware what's going on, and make sure you're evolving as these things develop, so that you're ready to grasp tomorrow, not get stuck in yesterday.
Right.
So.
Well, thanks, Mike. I know.
Thank you.
I mean, you're talking. I'm sure you got a lot to say, but that's a touch of some of the things we're learning at the conference. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.